Hello there, and welcome. Tonight, we're turning inward into the deep, strange architecture of your subconscious mind. Beneath your awareness, in the quiet shadows of thought, something extraordinary is always working. It shapes your dreams, it edits your memories, it decides what you notice and what you forget. It's running the show, and most of the time, you don't even realize it. Tonight, you'll discover just how powerful that hidden mind really is. From the science of suggestion to the mystery of intuition, we'll explore 100 of the most astonishing, overlooked, and sometimes eerie truths about the subconscious, the silent sculptor behind your every choice, emotion, and belief. And while you're settling in, before your eyes grow too heavy, I'd love it if you gently tapped subscribe or pressed the little hype button YouTube recently added. It's a small click, but it helps keep these experiments and explorations orbiting out into the algorithm. You can also leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the night. It's oddly fascinating to see where people are drifting off with us, scattered across the world like stars across the galaxy. Now take a deep breath, let your day drift away, and let's travel together into the quiet corners of the universe. Beneath your thoughts, beneath even the awareness of having thoughts, something ancient is watching. It does not speak in language or logic. It does not argue or plan. And yet, it moves you. It reaches through memory, guides your eyes across a room, nudges you away from danger, and pulls you toward things you do not fully understand. It is not unconscious in the sense of sleep, nor conscious in the way you read these words. It lives below that border, quiet, quick, and endlessly active. This is the subconscious mind. It has been called many names: the hidden self, the second mind, the shadow beneath, the spotlight of attention. But no matter what you call it, the truth remains. Most of what you do each day is not directed by your conscious decisions. Breathing is automatic. Blinking, swallowing, adjusting your posture, all done without your say-so. But so are more complex things. Your brain notices patterns before you do. It makes snap judgments about faces, voices, choices, all within milliseconds. You justify those decisions later, after the subconscious has already set them in motion. Biologically, the subconscious operates through networks buried deep in the brain. It is older than language and faster than reason, while the conscious mind plays out across the outer folds of the neocortex, slow, deliberate, and verbal. The subconscious dances through older structures. The limbic system, the basal ganglia, the brainstem. These are not regions of stillness. They are alive with motion, filtering every signal from the outside world, deciding what matters and what can be ignored hundreds of times a second. Every flicker of emotion, every physical response, every gut instinct flows from this interior engine. Psychologically, we experience the subconscious in strange ways. Through slips of the tongue, through dreams that seem to mean something, even when we don't know what. Through moments when our body acts faster than our mind can catch up, pulling away from a hot surface before pain arrives, or feeling an unease in a room before anything goes wrong. It's not magic. It's memory, association, and emotional tagging. Everything you've ever seen, heard, or felt has left a trace in the mind. These traces stack and cross-link below awareness, forming paths that your conscious mind walks without realizing it. Evolutionarily, the subconscious mind is a survival tool. Long before humans thought in sentences, they moved through instinct and pattern recognition. They felt fear before they saw danger. They read tone before they understood words. Even now, a baby will mimic a smile, turn toward the sound of a heartbeat, calm at the rhythm of a rocking motion. These are not learned behaviors. They are buried reflexes, inherited and honed over hundreds of thousands of years. The subconscious is not a ghost in the machine. It is the machine that kept us alive long before we understood what survival meant. When you enter a room, your subconscious is first to notice where the exits are. It scans faces and looks for symmetry, familiarity, potential threat. It listens not just to words but to tone, volume, the rhythm of speech. It compares what it sees now to everything it has ever seen. And it does this silently. It doesn't ask for your permission. It simply moves your attention toward what matters, long before you have time to explain why. Your conscious mind, by contrast, is narrow. It can only hold a few things at once. You can focus on a face, or a phone, or a phrase, but not all three in equal measure. The subconscious holds everything else. The room's temperature, the ticking clock, the itch on your arm that you don't notice until it becomes too strong to ignore. Like the backstage crew of a theater, it sets the lights, cues the actors, opens and closes the curtains, while your conscious self stands in the spotlight, believing it's the one in charge. But this hidden mind is not infallible. It runs on shortcuts, on biases. It generalizes quickly, sometimes too quickly. It favors the familiar, the safe, the expected. It builds habits and routines that persist long after they're useful. And it cannot speak directly. It whispers through dreams, through bodily signals, through the quiet pull of intuition. If you ignore it too long, it doesn't argue, it finds other ways to get your attention. Fatigue, anxiety, a sudden memory that appears out of nowhere, attached to a smell or a song. This is why so much of therapy, meditation, or deep reflection is not about finding something new, but about remembering something already known. The subconscious doesn't forget. It simply files things away until the time is right. And when the conscious mind grows quiet, when you're drifting off to sleep, or staring at the sea, or walking in silence, it begins to emerge, gently, like a hand reaching up through water. Even language, the most conscious of tools, is shaped by what lies beneath. You speak before you think about how you'll say something. You finish a sentence without knowing how it will end. The words rise from somewhere, assembled faster than logic allows. And when the wrong word slips out a name in place of another, a laugh at the wrong time, sometimes it means nothing. Sometimes it means more than you're ready to admit. The subconscious is not just reactive, it is expressive. It wants to be known, but not directly. To understand yourself is not just to track thoughts. It is to follow the moods that come and go without reason, to notice the quiet preferences that shape your day, why you sit in the same chair, why you avoid certain colors, why some songs make you cry even though the lyrics mean nothing to you. Beneath these choices are older stories. Some are personal, some are inherited, and some may go back further than language can reach. The subconscious mind is not a place of darkness. It is a place of depth. It remembers what the surface forgets. It moves in patterns. It dreams in symbols. It feels before it speaks. And while the conscious mind may be the narrator, it is the subconscious that writes the script. It keeps the rhythm of your life ticking quietly in the background, adjusting and learning as you move forward. Even now, as you breathe, as you listen, as your eyes begin to close, it is there, watching, guiding, remembering, waiting for the next thing you need before you know that you need it. When Freud first looked into the human mind, he saw an ocean, not of water, but of meaning. Something vast, powerful, and mostly hidden. Only the surface was visible, the words we speak, the reasons we give, the choices we think we've made. But beneath it, he imagined something larger, something older, something constantly in motion. He called it the unconscious, but what he really meant was this: the mind does not end at the edge of awareness. It only begins there. His metaphor has lasted over a century. The mind is an iceberg, just the tip showing above water, the rest submerged in darkness. Above the surface lies the conscious, what you know, what you can describe, what you can control. But below is the preconscious and the unconscious memories you're not thinking about but could recall, and desires or fears you couldn't name even if you tried. These hidden layers guide your behavior more than you realize, and they're not passive. They pull, they resist, they dream, they leak into language, into love, into every silent second between your words. To Freud, the subconscious wasn't a gentle whisper. It was wild, chaotic, a place of primal drives and buried conflicts. The id, as he called it, lived here. The part of the mind ruled by instinct, hunger, pleasure, and pain. The ego, standing in the middle, tried to manage this tidal force while still satisfying the world's demands. And the superego, a kind of internal judge, pressed down with the weight of guilt, rules, and imagined perfection. These weren't just theories. They were a framework for the storms he saw in his patients. Dreams that spoke in riddles, behaviors that defied reason, symptoms without a cause. Freud believed that much of what troubled us came from what we refused to see. A painful memory pushed out of awareness, a forbidden desire wrapped in shame, a childhood wound dressed up as adult pride. Repression, he said, was not forgetting. It was an active process, the mind working to keep certain thoughts hidden, like locking a room from the inside. But the contents never stayed quiet. They found ways to speak through symptoms, through slips of the tongue, through dreams that made no sense but left us shaken in the morning light. Even now, long after Freud's original theories have been revised and challenged, the iceberg remains. Modern neuroscience may not use the same language, but it has confirmed the same landscape. Most of the brain's activity, perhaps as much as 95%, occurs outside of conscious awareness. You respond to faces before recognizing them. Your brain detects threats before your heart speeds up. You form impressions of people, make snap decisions, and only later invent the reasons why. The conscious mind explains. The subconscious decides. But while Freud saw the subconscious as a realm of conflict and repression, newer models have painted it with broader colors. It is not just a battlefield between instinct and control. It is also the stage where habits live, where intuition is born, where creativity grows in silence. It is the network of learned patterns, stored experiences, emotional cues, and predictive models that your brain runs beneath awareness every moment of your life. You don't think about how to tie your shoes anymore. You don't remember every detail of the road while you drive. You don't consciously plan each word as you speak. The subconscious handles it not with magic, but with repetition, with learning, with deeply encoded familiarity. What you practice long enough becomes automatic. What you avoid often enough becomes invisible. And what you fear most, if not brought to light, may start to shape your life from behind the curtain. Freud's legacy is not just in how he described the mind, but in how he gave people permission to imagine it as layered. That inner life wasn't just one voice, it was a conversation, sometimes a conflict, sometimes a chorus. He introduced the idea that we could know ourselves more fully, not by thinking harder, but by paying attention to what we ignore. A dream that repeats, a hesitation before speaking, a strange reaction to a simple question. To Freud, these were clues, like cracks in the surface, revealing something deeper underneath. The iceberg model gave shape to the invisible. It helped people understand why they acted against their own interests, why old pain could linger beneath new love, why the past could echo in the present without permission. It reminded us that self-awareness is a journey inward, not just upward, not about control, but curiosity. In therapy, Freud asked people to speak freely, to follow their thoughts wherever they led, no matter how strange or trivial. He believed the subconscious would reveal itself in fragments, in associations, in words spoken without thinking. He listened for the unsaid, for what slipped out, for what was said too quickly or not at all. The goal was not to judge, but to understand, to lift one small part of the iceberg into view. Today, the language has changed. We talk about implicit memory, about automatic processing, about unconscious bias, and default mode networks. But the shape of the idea remains. There is more mind than we can see, And the mind that hides beneath is not inert. It is active. It is layered. It is constantly writing the script of who we are, line by line, even when we think we're the ones holding the pen. Freud's iceberg was never meant to be frozen. It was always shifting. What was once hidden can be brought to light. What feels irrational can be traced back to something remembered, something once too painful to hold. The subconscious is not just a vault of secrets. It is a living record, a mirror turned inward. And if we look closely enough, gently enough, we begin to see not just what we do, but why we do it. Even now, as your mind softens towards sleep, parts of it are still listening, still deciding, still shaping the next thought before it arrives. That is the power of the unseen mind. It holds your history, your reflexes, your dreams. It is not behind you. It is beneath you, a presence, quiet and vast, waiting for your attention like something just below the surface. You like to think you're steering, that every step you take, every word you choose, every glance you give is yours, deliberate, logical, and willed into being. But most of the time, you're following a path that's already been set. You just don't know it yet. Before you decide to move your hand, your brain has already begun the motion. Before you choose between coffee or tea, between yes or no, between speak or stay silent, networks deep within your mind have weighed the context, calculated the risks, and nudged you toward an answer. You explain it afterward. You give it a reason, a narrative, a sense of control. But the truth is, the choice has often already been made. Your conscious mind just signs the papers. Scientists have seen it happen. In a quiet lab, a participant is told to press a button whenever they feel like it. No pattern, no plan, just choose. Electrodes monitor the brain, and something strange appears. A signal, a readiness potential, flares up seconds before the person becomes aware of their decision. The subconscious lights the match before the conscious even feels the spark. And this isn't just in labs. It's in the way you turn your head toward a sound, or avoid eye contact with someone who makes you uneasy before you've even spoken. It's in the flicker of attention when you walk past a shop window, or the strange urge to cross the street without knowing why. Every second, your brain receives far more information than you could ever consciously process. So it filters, it prioritizes, it decides. You're not ignoring the hundreds of faces in a crowd, you simply don't notice them. You're not choosing to feel uneasy in a dark hallway, you just do. The subconscious has already scanned the environment, drawn from memory, and whispered its verdict through emotion or instinct. All before you even realize there's something to react to. This isn't a flaw, it's a survival feature. Conscious thought is slow, deliberate, careful, but the subconscious is fast, efficient. It has to be. A predator doesn't wait for analysis. A lie doesn't always come with a warning label. And not everything dangerous is loud. Sometimes, your body knows first, tightening your chest, raising your skin, pulling your focus toward a shadow, before your mind can name the reason. It's not paranoia. It's pattern recognition built over a lifetime, whispering beneath the surface. Even your eye movements betray the myth of control. When you look at a face, your eyes dart to the eyes, the mouth, the edges, without instruction. When you read a sentence, your gaze jumps predictively, anticipating meaning before comprehension catches up. Advertisers know this. Designers build layouts that lead your attention without your consent. You think you're scanning freely, but you're being guided by color, by contrast, by shapes that trigger ancient instincts. Circles feel safe, angles feel sharp, red gets noticed, blue calms. You follow these cues without realizing you've obeyed them. Think about how often you just had a feeling about someone, or said something you didn't mean to say, or remembered something without knowing why. These aren't accidents, they're signals. Your subconscious is always at work, sorting through memories, scanning the present, comparing it to the past. It predicts. It fills in blanks. It writes the first draft of your behavior. And you, your conscious self, reads that draft aloud, as if you wrote it. Even attraction, fear, and desire are driven by this hidden engine. You don't choose what kind of voice makes your heart race. You don't decide which smells feel familiar. These are impressions etched into you long before you could explain them. Some go back to childhood, others even further, carried through culture, instinct, evolution. The warmth of a low voice, the comfort of a familiar rhythm, the sudden unease in silence. The subconscious has opinions you weren't aware it formed, and yet they shape every room you walk into. Free will, in this light, becomes less of a clean decision and more of a layered negotiation. You can steer the ship, yes, but only after the course has already been charted by winds you didn't feel and tides you didn't notice. You can say no, resist, reflect. But the first response? That flicker of action, that gut yes or no, that comes from elsewhere. And that's not something to fear, it's something to understand. Because once you notice the patterns, once you realize that many of your reactions aren't random, but rooted, you begin to see where your power actually lies. Not in the first thought, but in the second. Not in the instinct, but in the pause after it. You may not control the spark, but you can choose what it lights. Your subconscious is not an enemy. It's a guardian, a fast-moving filter, a memory bank, a story editor. It watches the world for you, shielding you from overload, protecting you from chaos, and gently nudging your attention toward what matters most. It gets it wrong sometimes, but more often, it's quietly right, too fast to explain, too deep to prove, and too familiar to question. And even now, as you listen, as your body softens and your breath slows, it's still working, picking up the rhythm of this voice, noticing the space between words, settling into calm long before your thoughts do, the part of you that always knows whether or not you're paying attention. As the lights go out and the world fades into quiet, your body begins to let go. Muscles soften, breathing deepens, eyes close, flutter once, and fall still. But inside your head, the story is only beginning. While you sleep, your brain does not. In fact, it may be working harder than it did during the day. Neurons fire in rhythm, memories shift and shuffle. Emotions are untangled. Problems you gave up on in the daylight begin to rearrange themselves in the dark. And at the center of it all is your subconscious, no longer in the background, but taking the lead. Sleep is not one long stretch of rest. It's a cycle, repeating every 90 minutes or so. Light sleep, deep sleep, REM, again and again, like waves brushing the edge of awareness. In deep sleep, your brain sinks into slow, powerful rhythms, electrical pulses that roll across the cortex, sweeping away the static of the day. During this stage, memories are sorted, some stored, some discarded. It's not just about recall, it's about meaning. Your brain is deciding what matters, even when you're not aware it's choosing. Not every memory makes it through. Most are trimmed away, like pruning a garden so that what's left can thrive. Experiences that are repeated, emotional, or useful are more likely to be kept. Others dissolve quietly, leaving no trace. You don't feel this happening. You're not watching the reels play back. But when you wake up, you remember what mattered, often without knowing why. Then comes REM sleep, where the dreaming happens. Your eyes move beneath closed lids, muscles go still, and your brain lights up in patterns that look almost like waking. But the logic is different here. Time twists, faces shift, places blend together. This is where the subconscious speaks in symbols, not to confuse you, but because symbols are its language. While the conscious mind tells stories with order and grammar, the subconscious uses imagery, emotion, movement, metaphor. It does not ask for permission, it simply begins. A staircase that never ends, a childhood home that's both familiar and wrong, a conversation that feels important but vanishes the moment you try to hold on to it. These are not random. They are fragments of thought that haven't been sorted yet, questions without answers, emotions without names, and the subconscious weaves them together into a kind of performance, not for an audience, but for integration. Dreams are not distractions, they are data processing, emotional rehearsal, mental filing, and sometimes subtle prediction. You may wake from a dream feeling clarity about something you couldn't resolve the day before. A decision suddenly feels obvious. A fear feels smaller. A memory seems softer around the edges. This is not coincidence. While you slept, your brain was testing possibilities, running simulations, rewriting mental code. Even insight, those flashes of understanding we call aha moments, often appear after sleep. You think you found the solution in the morning, but really, your mind found it in the dark and waited to show you. There are experiments that prove this. People given logic puzzles or creative tasks often perform better after sleep, even if they weren't thinking about the problem consciously. Something shifts while they rest. The brain, free from the noise of external input, is able to connect distant ideas, replay failures, and try again, all without instruction, all without supervision, just pattern recognition and persistence. The subconscious thrives in this quiet. It doesn't need daylight. It needs space. Without the constant chatter of waking thought, it can roam freely, associating, resolving, rehearsing. This is why dreams often bring up people or feelings you haven't thought of in years. They are not intrusions. They are threads being pulled, examined, restitched into the fabric of memory. The past is not dead in dreams. It is reorganizing itself. Even your body listens during sleep. Hormones shift, immune cells reset, muscles repair. The brain sends signals not just to preserve physical health but to regulate emotion. People deprived of REM sleep become emotionally unstable, reactive, anxious. It's not just about rest, it's about recalibration. The subconscious manages this too, balancing mood, integrating stress, softening the impact of pain. It learns from the day and teaches the body how to recover. But it doesn't just heal, it guides. The brain continues to make decisions during sleep, not in the way it does when awake, but in quiet, unconscious directions. People exposed to new information while sleeping can retain fragments of it. Sounds, languages, even preferences can shift. It's subtle, but it reveals a powerful truth. The mind never fully turns off. Even as you dream, it listens. Even as you drift, it remembers. Some cultures have long believed that dreams offer messages, visions, prophecies. Science may not use the same language, but the function is surprisingly close. Dreams tell you what matters, what you're avoiding, what your mind is trying to process, not through clear instructions, but through atmosphere, through tension, through symbolism. And if you pay attention not to the literal meaning, but to the feeling it leaves behind, you might start to notice what your waking mind has missed. You don't need to interpret every dream, but you can notice which ones linger, which ones feel loud, which ones return, again and again, like a memory knocking on the door of consciousness, asking to be seen. While you sleep, the conscious self recedes like a tide, but something else remains, watching, organizing, repairing, the part of you that does not need language to understand, the part that never needed to be told what to do. The subconscious doesn't rest. It waits in silence, working in the background, shaping who you'll be when you wake. You pass a billboard on your way to work. You don't remember what it says. You don't stop to read it. You barely even look. But that night, you find yourself craving the drink it advertised, something cold, bright, and sugar-sweet. It doesn't feel like suggestion. It feels like a thought that came from nowhere, a passing impulse. But it wasn't random. It was planted, not deliberately, not forcefully, just softly, invisibly, beneath the level of awareness. A seed dropped into the subconscious, left to grow in the dark. Subliminal perception is the art of the unnoticed. Words you don't quite hear. Images flash too quickly to name. Scents so faint they vanish before recognition. These things slip under the radar of conscious attention, but they do not go unseen. Your brain catches them. The subconscious holds them. And sometimes, quietly, they change you. It begins with the senses. Vision, hearing, smell, touch. Each of them constantly feeds information into the mind, far more than you can consciously process. Your awareness is like a narrow beam of light, illuminating just a sliver of what surrounds you. But the rest is still there, absorbed and evaluated without your knowledge. When a word appears on a screen for a fraction of a second too fast to name it still registers. It may make you faster to recognize similar words later. It may shift your mood, your preferences, your choices. You won't know why. You'll just feel differently, as if something subtle has changed in the room. Marketers know this. So do filmmakers, musicians, architects, and designers. They understand how the shape of a room can make you feel taller or smaller. How background music can speed up your footsteps. How a scent pumped into a store can make you linger longer, buy more, smile without reason. These are not accidents. They're invisible nudges, calibrated for effect. And yet if asked, you'd say your choices were your own. Even a single word can shift perception. In one experiment, people were asked to unscramble sentences containing words related to age, bingo, wrinkles, and Florida. They didn't notice the theme, but afterward, they walked more slowly down the hallway. The associations had burrowed in and shaped behavior without a whisper. This is called priming, a quiet spark, a mental association, lighting the path ahead before you know which way you're going. Smell is even more powerful. The olfactory system is ancient, wired directly into the limbic system, home to emotion and memory. A familiar scent can transport you instantly, bypassing logic. The smell of rain on warm pavement, a certain soap in a childhood bathroom, the invisible fingerprint of a loved one's skin. And it works in reverse, too. A faint whiff of cleaning product can make people more orderly. The smell of baked goods near a store entrance can increase generosity. You act differently, without ever naming the reason. Music, too, is a sculptor of mood. Not just the melody, but the tempo, the rhythm, the instrumentation. A slow song in a cafe makes you linger. An upbeat track makes you move faster through a store. Lyrics, even when unheard, can prime thoughts. Classical music in subway stations has been shown to reduce vandalism. It doesn't tell you what to do. It just reshapes the emotional weather, and you respond. Even colors speak in code. Blue calms, red activates, yellow draws attention, black adds weight. These reactions are not universal, but they are common enough to influence architecture, branding, clothing, even hospital walls. You don't need to notice the shade to feel its effect. Your subconscious handles that for you. It always has. Subliminal cues are not always commercial. They exist in the background of relationships, environments, routines. A pause before a word, the tension in someone's jaw, the way a room feels colder after a difficult conversation. You may not register the detail, but your behavior shifts. You become more guarded, more open, more distracted, and afterward, you can't explain what changed. You just know that something did. Your subconscious is constantly scanning for these things. It looks for familiarity, for contrast, for things that break the pattern. A slight change in someone's tone, a missed beat in the rhythm of a conversation. The eyes flicker, the heart adjusts. You can't name it, but you feel it. Sometimes this is intuition, sometimes anxiety, but always it is the result of 1,000 unseen signals, each whispering something too quiet for words. It's easy to think that only grand events change us, a crisis, a breakthrough, a decision made at a crossroads. But in truth, much of who we are is shaped in the small, repeated moments. A glance, a scent, a song in the background. These things accumulate like dust, light, invisible, but persistent. They settle into the subconscious and begin to guide us. You're not defenseless. Awareness changes the game. When you begin to notice the patterns, when you ask why a thought appeared, or a craving rose, or a mood shifted, you create space between the cue and the response. You can't always stop the influence, but you can recognize it. And with recognition comes choice. The subconscious isn't a sponge that absorbs without filter. It's an editor, a storyteller, a meaning maker. It notices what the conscious mind misses and decides whether to let it in. But just as it can be nudged, it can be trained. You can feed it different music, different words, different images. You can shape the environment that shapes you. And even now, in this quiet space, subtle cues are at work. The cadence of this voice, the rhythm of these words, the safe repetition of breath and silence. You don't have to notice it. Your mind already has. Something is shifting, softly, as it always does, as it always has. Habits are not choices, not after a while. They begin as decisions. Yes, something you try, repeat, adjust. But with time, the conscious effort fades, and what's left is something quieter, a rhythm, a loop, a familiar path worn into the fabric of your day, so smooth you hardly notice you're walking it. You wake up, you stretch, you reach for your phone, you brush your teeth with the same hand, in the same order, using the same brand. You drink your coffee at the same time, in the same mug, from the same seat. These are not coincidences. They are patterns, and your subconscious loves patterns. In the brain, habits live in a region called the basal ganglia, a structure deep beneath the surface, older than language, older than thought. When you're first learning something, driving, tying a shoe, playing a new instrument, your prefrontal cortex lights up with effort, attention, planning, trial and error. But the more you repeat it, the more the task moves inward, deeper, quieter. Eventually, the basal ganglia takes over, and once a habit is stored there, it no longer requires conscious attention to run. It simply activates when triggered. That's the secret to habits. They're not just repeated actions, they're loops, anchored by cues. A cue sparks the behavior, a reward reinforces it. Over time, this cycle strengthens. Wake up and see the sunlight, there's your cue. Make coffee, there's your routine. Feel warmth and alertness, there's your reward. Repeat it often enough, and the brain begins to anticipate. Just seeing the light can trigger the urge for coffee. The act becomes automatic, almost inevitable. Your environment is filled with these cues, the sound of a notification, the sight of your running shoes, the smell of food, the feel of your phone in your hand. Each one linked to a behavior, shaped over time. You don't always choose them consciously. Sometimes the loop forms before you realize it, checking your phone when bored, biting your nails when anxious, reaching for a snack at the first sign of stress. The habit is the solution. The subconscious just wants to complete the pattern. Breaking a habit isn't about willpower alone. It's about disrupting the loop. Change the cue, or change the routine. Replace the reward. Create friction. Make the path less smooth. But first, you have to become aware that the pattern even exists. And that's the tricky part, because the subconscious is quiet. It doesn't raise its hand and announce, "I'm taking over now." It simply acts, and only after do you wonder why you did what you did. But the same mechanism that builds bad habits also builds good ones. The brain doesn't care if the loop is helpful or harmful. It only cares about repetition and reward. So if you pair a small, meaningful reward with something you want to repeat, exercise, reading, meditation, the loop begins to form. It doesn't need to be grand. a breath of fresh air, a sense of progress, a moment of calm. These are enough to light the circuit. Once a habit is set, it conserves energy. That's part of its genius. The brain offloads effort to make space for other tasks. You don't think about how to drive the familiar route. You don't analyze how to brush your teeth. You just do it. And while that might seem mechanical, it's actually a gift. Habits free up cognitive bandwidth. They make life smoother, but they also make it easy to drift, doing without deciding, reacting without reflecting, repeating without remembering why. The key is not to fight this automaticity, but to shape it. To notice which routines serve you and which quietly steal from your time, your health, your peace. The mind is always watching. It notices which actions follow which feelings. It keeps a tally of cause and effect. And over time, it builds a map, a shortcut through your daily life. That map can be redesigned, but only when you slow down long enough to see it. And sometimes, habit feels like home. The same stretch in the morning, the same song on your walk, the same mug, the same route, the same quiet hum of a task well known. These routines aren't shallow. They can be anchors, sources of comfort, signals of safety in a world full of noise. The subconscious doesn't just automate, they soothe, they stabilize, they give rhythm to the day. Not all routines need changing. Some deserve reverence, but others, if left unchecked, become cages, invisible ones. You might not notice that you always avoid starting a new project after a failure, or that you always speak less when a certain person enters the room. These are habits too, not of motion, but of emotion, of self-expression. They were learned, and what's learned can be unlearned. Even now, your brain is watching for patterns, listening for loops. This very act, settling into a story at the same time each night, may be becoming a habit itself. A cue for calm, a signal to rest. The words fall into rhythm. The body softens, and without realizing it, you are training your mind to associate this quiet with safety. The subconscious loves repetition, but it doesn't crave perfection, only familiarity. And with that familiarity comes trust. So when you build habits, whether by chance or by choice, know that they are more than routines. They are memories in motion, signals to the self, stories the body tells again and again until they feel like truth. Long before your first word, before you knew how to count or name the colors in the sky, your body was already thinking. Not in language, not in logic, but in signals and rhythms. It listened to hunger. It flinched from heat. It recognized the heartbeat of the person who held you. Even now, beneath every thought you think you're thinking, your body is engaged in a silent, ongoing conversation between cells, nerves, organs, and pulses of instinct that move faster than explanation. The mind doesn't just sit in the head. It hums through the body. The gut, for example, is not just where you digest your meals. It is dense with neurons, over 500 million of them, connected directly to your brain through a vast highway of nerves, most prominently the vagus. This system is called the gut-brain axis, and its messages travel in both directions. When you feel nervous and your stomach twists, that's not a metaphor, it's a signal. When you sense danger and lose your appetite, when you feel joy and your digestion improves, when you just know something is wrong without knowing why, that's your second brain speaking. This enteric nervous system operates largely outside your awareness. It tracks what you eat, what you feel, how safe you are, and in response, it adjusts everything from immune function to emotion. 90% of the communication on that nerve highway flows upward from the gut to the brain, not the other way around. That means your belly often tells your mind how to feel, not vice versa. You may believe a thought caused your mood, but sometimes it was a microbial shift, a slight imbalance, a ripple through the nervous system that changed the emotional weather before the conscious mind caught on. Intuition lives here too. that strange knowing, that sense that something isn't right, even if every fact says otherwise. It's not magic, it's not irrational. It's often the body remembering something faster than the brain can retrieve it. A posture, a glance, a tone, it reminds you of something buried deep, and the body reacts before you can name the reason. A quickened pulse, a held breath, the sensation that something is off. Your conscious mind may dismiss it, but the body keeps the score. Posture itself is a kind of silent thinking. The way you sit, stand, and move doesn't just reflect how you feel, it helps create it. When you slump, your body compresses, your breathing shallows, and your mind begins to echo the shape of that collapse. Confidence fades, focus dims. But when you lift your chest, expand your lungs, plant your feet, you don't just look different, you feel different. Hormones shift, stress lowers, the body cues the mind to believe in strength again. It's a feedback loop so subtle we rarely notice it, yet it shapes how we move through the world. Touch is another language the body speaks fluently. A hand on the shoulder, a weighted blanket, the pressure of warm water. These things aren't just comforting because we learn they are. They comfort us because the body recognizes them as safety cues. Infants held skin to skin regulate their heart rate and temperature more quickly. Adults, too, find their nervous systems soothed by pressure, rhythm, and connection. These responses are faster than thought. They are ancient agreements coded into muscle and bone. Even the way we breathe is more than mechanics. Slow, deep breaths signal safety to the brain. Rapid, shallow ones signal threat. And the brain, ever obedient to the signals of the body, responds accordingly, releasing calming neurochemicals or preparing for a fight. You might believe you're stressed because of your thoughts, but sometimes the breath came first. There is intelligence here, not the kind that solves equations or debates philosophy, but the kind that senses patterns, anticipates needs, and responds with precision. Your immune system, for example, adapts in real time to internal and external threats. It learns, it remembers. Your muscles carry memory, too, not just of actions, but of trauma, tension, rhythm. A dancer may not recall every step with the mind, but the body will move as if it does. A scar remembers how the wound was made. The body does not forget, even when the mind moves on. This intelligence is quiet, but persistent. It shows up in dreams, in cravings, in the places pain lingers without clear reason. It's in the tightness of your jaw when you're overwhelmed, the tilt of your head when you're curious, the sway in your stance when you're uncertain. Your body speaks long before you do, and this silent system is always negotiating, tracking your environment, measuring your reactions, adjusting your chemistry. It's not separate from your mind, it's part of it. An underground network, vast and sensitive, always gathering information and shaping your experience from below the surface. So much of what we call emotion is born from this place. The warmth in your chest when you feel love, the ache in your gut when something feels wrong, the flutter in your stomach when you're on the edge of something new. These are not poetic turns of phrase. They are precise descriptions of embodied intelligence, signals from the body that help the mind know what it's feeling. And perhaps this is the great mistake we've made, imagining that thought ends at the neck, that the body is only a vessel, a servant, a machine. It is more than that. It is a co-author of your reality. It is a second voice, one that does not speak in words but in sensation, tension, release. And when you learn to listen, to pause and feel, you begin to understand things that thought alone could never teach. Even now, as your breath deepens and your body begins to relax, that intelligence is at work, calming your heart, softening your muscles, whispering to the mind that it's safe to let go. You don't need to explain why you feel calmer. The body already knows. Memory feels like a recording, like something solid, something we can press play on and watch again exactly as it happened. But memory is not a tape. It's not a file tucked away in a cabinet in your brain, waiting to be retrieved untouched. It's more like wet paint lifted each time you reach for it, then brushed back into place with new strokes, new colors, altered slightly by whatever you're feeling in the moment. The past, as you recall it, is being rewritten by the present. The subconscious is the quiet architect of this process. It doesn't ask you what's true. It asks what fits. It smooths over jagged edges in your story, adjusts faces, shuffles timelines, edits out the pieces that don't match who you believe you are now. Not out of malice, not to deceive, but to protect coherence. The brain values meaning over accuracy. And so, every memory is filtered through what you know now, what you need now, who you've become since the moment first occurred. You remember your childhood room, but some of the colors might be borrowed from a photograph. You remember an argument, but your role in it may have softened or sharpened depending on what you've learned since. You remember a friend's words, but not the exact ones, only the echo of how they made you feel. Emotion sticks, detail fades. The subconscious chooses which parts to hold and which to let drift. Sometimes, the memory itself isn't real, but the feeling is. People can remember events that never happened, a vacation never taken, a word never spoken, a kindness never shown, or a wound never inflicted. Suggestion, repetition, even the power of someone else's story can blur the lines between imagined and lived. Your mind doesn't always flag these as fiction. If they fit the narrative, they're welcomed in. This isn't a flaw, it's an adaptation. Perfect memory isn't always helpful. Sometimes forgetting is healing. Sometimes reshaping a memory allows us to survive it. If every painful moment stayed vivid and sharp, it would be hard to grow past it. The subconscious dulls the edges, tucks away the details, reshapes the tone. It gives you a version of the story you can live with. But it's not just pain that's softened. The everyday is smoothed out too. You forget the exact date, the order of events, the way someone's voice cracked at the end of a sentence. These small things slip beneath the surface. What remains is the impression, the pattern, a few clear images surrounded by fog. You walk through your life, not with a perfect map, but with familiar landmarks, updated each time you look. Even something as simple as telling a story to someone can change the memory itself. You emphasize different parts. You adjust the pace. You add a detail to make it clearer. You skip another because it doesn't feel relevant. The version you tell becomes the version you remember. The brain treats the act of recall as a new experience, and so the memory bends slightly to reflect that retelling. This is why two people can share the same moment and walk away with different recollections. It's not just perspective, it's reconstruction. Their minds filled in different blanks. Their emotions colored different scenes. And both are true in the way memory allows things to be. True to experience, but not necessarily to fact. Trauma adds another layer. When something overwhelms the mind, the way it's stored changes. Some memories fragment, others burn in with too much clarity. The subconscious may bury the moment, hide it in symbols, or replay it again and again, searching for resolution. The past feels present. The body reacts as if it's happening now. And healing often requires more than logic. It needs a new relationship to the memory, a reshaping from the inside out. Even in daily life, memory is active. It helps you decide who to trust, what to fear, what matters. But what you remember is shaped by what your subconscious believes to be important. You're more likely to recall moments tied to strong emotion, to personal values, to survival. 100 compliments might fade, but one criticism lingers. Not because it's more real, but because the subconscious tagged it as urgent, something to protect against. And so, the past is never quite settled. It drifts, rewrites, folds into the present. You are not the same person who lived your earlier memories. And so the mind updates them, shaping a version of the past that fits your current self. Sometimes this brings clarity, other times, confusion. You feel nostalgia but can't trust the details. You feel regret but wonder if it happened the way you think. The mind blurs, sharpens, edits. But maybe that's not a weakness. Maybe that's how we keep growing. Memory is not there to preserve the past in perfect form. It's there to guide you, gently, through the present, to help you learn, adapt, connect. The subconscious doesn't need exact replicas. It needs meaning, and meaning is always a living thing. So the next time you remember something, an old conversation, a first kiss, a childhood joy or sorrow, know that you're touching something fluid, something shaped by who you were and who you are. And in that quiet space between then and now, the subconscious weaves its thread, tying the past to the present with invisible hands. Emotions arrive before explanation. They don't wait for language or logic. They don't ask your permission. One moment, everything is still, and then something shifts. A wave rises. You feel a quickening in your chest, or a hollowing in your stomach. Your face tightens, your shoulders pull in, your breath stutters. You haven't decided to feel anything, but you're already in it. The thought comes second, the story comes later. First, there is the signal. The subconscious does not speak in words. It speaks in sensation, reaction, and pattern. And emotions are among its most ancient forms of communication. Before humans had speech, before writing, before tools, we had feelings. A flicker of fear to signal danger, a pulse of joy to reinforce connection, a weight of sadness to slow us down when healing was needed. These reactions are not random. They are data. Each emotion is a message, crafted by the subconscious to guide action, to protect, to alert, to preserve balance. But because they emerge so quickly, often in less than a fifth of a second, they seem to appear out of nowhere. Something in your environment, something subtle and unnoticed, triggers a shift. A glance from someone across the room, a change in lighting, a half-remembered scent, and the subconscious, ever watchful, pulls the lever. Before your conscious mind has had time to process the stimulus, your body has already begun to react. Your heart rate changes, muscles tighten or release, neurochemicals flood in. You're no longer just observing the world, you're responding to it. This rapid response has helped humans survive. For millennia, the ability to feel danger before identifying it, to sense tension in a conversation before words are exchanged, to pick up on emotional undercurrents. These are not irrational sensitivities. They are adaptive tools. The subconscious is scanning constantly, even when your attention is elsewhere. It recognizes micro-expressions, the tiniest changes in tone, posture, and breath. And based on thousands of patterns from your life, it predicts what might come next and how you should feel in response. Sometimes, though, the signals get crossed. A past wound echoes into the present. A safe moment feels threatening because it resembles something once dangerous. The subconscious doesn't analyze, it matches. It says, "This looks like that," and sends the same emotional warning, even if it's no longer needed. And then you feel it, the anxiety, the shame, the anger, but you can't explain why. Your conscious mind scrambles to build a story around it, to make sense of the feeling. But the story may not be true. It may just be the best guess your mind can offer to explain a message it didn't originate. Emotions also don't stay contained. They leak into posture, expression, and movement. The facial feedback hypothesis suggests that the simple act of smiling, even when unprompted by joy, can lift mood. Furrowing your brow can deepen worry. The face and the feeling are connected. The body doesn't just reflect emotion, it shapes it. When you cry, it's not only to express sadness. The tears contain stress hormones. They help regulate your system. When you laugh, it's not just sound, it's breath, muscle contraction, endorphins. Your body participates in every emotion you feel, not as an afterthought, but as a partner. And moods, those lingering emotional climates, often arise from subtle patterns your mind never notices. A restless night, a scent that reminds you of something unresolved, a song in a minor key playing quietly in a cafe. Your subconscious picks up on these, weighs them against your history, and sets a tone. You feel off, irritable, or peaceful without clear reason. You look for causes, but the cause may be invisible, stored in a signal your body understood before your mind did. This doesn't mean emotions are always accurate, but they are always real, always meaningful. They tell you something about your inner landscape, your past, your expectations. And while you can't control their arrival, you can learn to listen, to pause before reacting, to ask not just, "What am I feeling?" but "Where did this come from?" Sometimes, naming the emotion is enough to loosen its grip. The conscious mind, when engaged gently, can help the subconscious feel heard. The reverse is true too. When emotions are denied, buried, ignored, they don't disappear. They move deeper. They become tension in the shoulders, knots in the gut, fatigue that doesn't fade. The subconscious holds on to them, waiting for a safer time to release. But if that time never comes, the feeling may harden into a mood, or a belief, or a reflex. Not because you chose it, but because the system is always trying to adapt. Children feel this keenly. Before they can articulate, they experience the world through the emotional tone of their caregivers. A voice, a glance, a touch. Their subconscious absorbs it all, building emotional templates that often persist into adulthood. Many of our strongest emotional reactions today have roots in those early patterns. A raised voice might feel like danger even if it's not. Silence might feel like abandonment. Reassurance might feel unfamiliar. These associations live beneath language, but they guide how we relate to the world. And yet, the system is not fixed. It can be rewired, slowly, with attention, with compassion. By noticing your patterns, honoring your emotions without being ruled by them, and choosing new responses, you begin to reshape the signals. You teach your subconscious what is safe, what is true, what is possible. Even now, as you breathe a little deeper, you may notice a softening, a sense of warmth, calm. That too is a signal, a quiet message from the subconscious that says, this is a place where you can rest, where feeling is not a threat, but a guide, where you don't have to explain yourself to be understood. Because sometimes the body knows, the breath knows, the heart, without words, knows, and the mind is finally quiet enough to listen. Every night, as your body falls into stillness and your conscious thoughts begin to dissolve, something ancient stirs beneath the surface. The world of waking slips away, and without effort, without invitation, you enter a different terrain. In this place, time bends, logic loosens, the familiar becomes strange, and the strange becomes intimate. You are no longer tethered to facts or expectations. You are dreaming, and though it may feel like drifting, something purposeful is unfolding beneath the surface. The subconscious is speaking in its native tongue. Dreams are not nonsense. They are not scraps of random thought thrown together for entertainment. They are symbols, stories, rehearsals, and reflections. A bridge between your inner world and the wider world you move through. Every face you see, every place you wander, every impossible shift from moment to moment is part of a language older than speech metaphor. The subconscious does not speak in linear sentences. It speaks in images, in patterns, in echoes. You dream of flying when you feel free, of falling when you feel uncertain. You dream of people you've never met whose faces carry the weight of someone you once knew. You dream of water rising, of houses with hidden rooms, of strange animals watching from a distance. These images may seem random, but they are not. They are the emotional fingerprints of your inner life. The subconscious takes your fears, your longings, your questions, and shapes them into metaphors that bypass the filters of your waking mind. Carl Jung believed dreams carried archetypes, universal symbols that show up across cultures and time. The wise old man, the shadow self, the innocent child, the protective mother. These are not inventions. They are recurring forms that speak to the human experience at a deep, symbolic level. When you dream of being lost, it may not be about a map. It may be about identity. When you dream of a storm, it may not be about weather. It may be the external expression of an internal shift. The subconscious prefers symbol because it allows for complexity. A single dream image can carry layers of meaning, shaped by your past, your present, and the emotional tone of the moment. A childhood home may symbolize comfort or confinement. A stairway may suggest ascension or escape. The meaning isn't fixed. It's fluid. It bends to your emotional truth. Dreams also help you solve problems. Studies have shown that people working through complex puzzles, creative projects, or emotional dilemmas often find unexpected answers after sleep. The subconscious keeps working while the conscious mind rests. It sifts, sorts, connects. It plays with ideas in non-linear ways, exploring combinations you wouldn't consider while awake. That's why artists, inventors, writers, and thinkers throughout history have credited dreams with breakthroughs. They weren't just imagining, they were listening. In dreams, the boundaries of identity also shift. You might see yourself from the outside. You might become someone else entirely. You might speak languages you don't know, feel emotions you haven't named, or visit places that have never existed. And yet, it all feels real. The subconscious is not bound by ego. It explores possibility, rehearses risk, reprocesses the events of the day in ways the waking mind can't quite access. Some dreams replay familiar scenes, conversations you wish had gone differently, a conflict that left a mark. Others create entirely new narratives. Both types serve a purpose. Repetition allows for emotional processing. Invention allows for emotional rehearsal. And in both, the subconscious is doing something active. It's helping you feel what needs to be felt. Understand what was previously confusing. Integrate what was too much to face directly. Even nightmares have meaning. They aren't failures of sleep, they're signals. Your subconscious raises the volume when something needs attention. A buried fear, a lingering tension, a truth you've pushed aside. It may dress the message in horror or absurdity, but underneath, there is something real, something waiting to be felt. Sometimes, dreams don't make sense immediately. That's part of their magic. They speak in riddles, in fragments, in colors and sensations. But over time, patterns emerge. You start to notice recurring symbols, emotional themes, situations that echo waking life in abstract ways. This noticing is a form of listening, and with practice, the conversation between you and your subconscious becomes more fluent. Not all dreams are profound. Some are playful, surreal, drifting, a patchwork of recent memories and background noise. But even in those, there's something revealing. What your mind chooses to keep, even momentarily, says something about what matters, what hurts, what delights, what lingers just beneath awareness. It's also worth noting that not all dreams are remembered, but that doesn't mean they don't do their work. The dreaming brain moves through cycles, REM and non-REM, each serving different functions. Some help process emotion, others consolidate memory, others help with motor learning or creative synthesis. The subconscious doesn't need your permission or participation. It moves quietly, automatically, doing what it's done for thousands of nights before this one. And perhaps what's most beautiful is that dreams level us. No matter who you are, what you believe, what you fear, how you live, every night you return to this realm, vulnerable, malleable, open. Your subconscious takes over, and for a few hours, it becomes the storyteller. Not with facts, but with feeling, not with rules, but with resonance. So the next time you wake with a strange image lingering at the edge of your mind, resist the urge to dismiss it. Sit with it. Let it unfold slowly. Ask not what it means in words, but what it stirs in you, what it reminds you of, what it wants you to feel. Because dreams aren't just echoes of your mind, they are messages from the depths. And the subconscious, in all its quiet complexity, is always trying to tell you a story worth hearing. Creativity does not arrive on command. You can stare at a blank page for hours, fingers poised, willing brilliance to surface, and nothing comes. But then later, when your mind has drifted and your focus has softened, something clicks. You're in the shower, or walking through a quiet street, or lying half asleep with the day's weight slipping off your shoulders. And out of nowhere, the idea appears, complete, surprising, alive. It feels like magic, but it isn't. It's the subconscious, finally given space to speak. The myth of creative genius often paints inspiration as divine, sudden, inexplicable, but the truth is quieter. Ideas are built in layers, assembled from fragments collected when you weren't looking. A sentence half heard on a train, a memory that surfaced for no reason, a question you never answered. Your subconscious gathers these like puzzle pieces, testing their fit in the background while your conscious mind is occupied elsewhere. When the right shape finally emerges, it sends it forward not with fanfare, but with a whisper. That whisper is the flash of insight, the aha moment, the unexpected connection. It often comes when you've stopped trying, not because the effort wasn't necessary, but because letting go allows the deeper processes to surface. The subconscious does not thrive under pressure. It prefers openness, movement, rhythm. That's why ideas bloom during walks, while washing dishes, while folding laundry. The body moves, the mind softens, and the quiet part of you begins to work. In a way, creativity is less about invention and more about recognition. The raw material is already within you, waiting to be noticed. The subconscious is constantly making associations, drawing lines between things that don't appear connected on the surface. It plays freely with metaphor, with image, with sensation. It is not bound by linear thought or rigid categories. It sees in patterns, in moods, in flashes. And when you loosen your grip on logic, when you stop demanding answers, the connections rise to meet you. There's also a kind of safety in the subconscious. Because it operates below judgment, it's not afraid to explore strange territory. It doesn't censor ideas before they form. It doesn't worry if they're good enough. It lets them unfold, raw and unfiltered. That's why the best ideas often feel slightly out of your control, like they arrived from somewhere beyond you, and in a way, they did. They came from the version of you that is always watching, always listening, always stitching together meaning in silence. Dreams, too, are fertile ground for this process. Many artists, inventors, and writers have pulled their most enduring ideas from the images and symbols that surfaced in sleep. In dreams, the subconscious has full control of the narrative. It rearranges the pieces of your day, your memories, your questions, and plays with them like clay. Some shapes are nonsense, others are breakthroughs. And even when they're strange, they carry emotional truth. That truth can be a compass. The subconscious also remembers things the conscious mind forgets. It stores imagery, language, sound, and feeling long after you've stopped thinking about them. That forgotten childhood, book, the melody you heard years ago, the conversation that lingered even after you moved on, they're all there, woven into your internal archive. When the moment is right, the subconscious retrieves them, not always directly, but through echoes. You feel a familiarity in your own idea, a sense that it's both new and deeply known. That's the past returning in disguise. Sometimes, creativity needs you to stop forcing solutions, to walk away, to rest. The subconscious continues without you. It sifts through the pieces, rearranges them, tests new angles. And when you return, when you sit back down and pick up the thread, it offers you something better than what you tried to squeeze out through willpower. This isn't laziness, it's strategy, it's patience. The subconscious prefers to be invited, not commanded. Playfulness also unlocks this space. When you approach a problem with curiosity rather than demand, the pressure lifts. You're no longer trying to win, you're exploring. And exploration is what the subconscious does best. It tries combinations without fear of failure. It lets you follow tangents, chase strange images, ask impossible questions, and often it is in those strange side paths that the most original ideas live. Children live in this space naturally. Their creativity is less about crafting and more about discovering. They aren't bound yet by what's right. Their subconscious is fully engaged in their play, their stories, their questions. As adults, we tend to bury that freedom beneath layers of critique, but it's still there. The part of you that doodled in the margins, that made up songs under your breath, that imagined whole worlds before sleep, that part has not disappeared. It just waits for quiet, for permission. So if you're searching for your next idea, consider this. Maybe you already have it. Maybe it's forming, just beneath awareness, waiting for the noise to die down. Take the walk. Let the question simmer. Step away from the demand for brilliance. And then when you least expect it, it might find you. Not as a shout, but as a subtle shift. A door creaking open. A shape forming in the dark. Fear does not ask for permission. It arrives suddenly. A tightening of the chest, a quickening of the breath, a flush of heat in the face, or a coldness down the spine. Sometimes it makes sense a loud noise, a dangerous situation, a known threat. But other times, it rises without explanation. A shadow in a familiar room, a harmless animal, a word, a smell, a glance. And the fear feels real, sharp, undeniable, even when your rational mind can't find a reason. That's because fear, more often than not, doesn't begin in thought. It begins in the subconscious. The subconscious remembers what the conscious mind forgets, especially when it comes to pain. Trauma does not always leave behind a clear narrative. Sometimes it leaves behind only the emotional residue sensations without stories. Your mind might move on, but your body keeps the score. The subconscious catalogs patterns, tones, gestures, environments. It learns quickly what is dangerous and stores that information deep, so it can react faster next time, faster than thought, faster than reason. This is why phobias often seem illogical. A person might freeze at the sight of a bird, refuse to enter elevators, panic in wide-open spaces or in crowded rooms. These reactions aren't chosen. They're triggered. A part of the subconscious has linked that specific stimulus with danger, often in a way that bypasses memory. You might not remember the original moment. It might have been small, a loud noise when you were a child, a parent's fear passed down without words, a film scene that struck too deeply, but the emotional imprint remains. And when something in your present echoes that old pattern, the alarm sounds. This pattern recognition system is powerful, and for the most part, it serves a vital purpose. The subconscious is designed to protect you, to keep you alive. It learns from experience and generalizes for safety. If a dog bites you once, your subconscious may begin to treat all dogs as threats. If you were shamed for speaking up as a child, your subconscious may send waves of anxiety every time you try to express yourself, even decades later. It's not punishing you. It's trying to help, trying to prevent the same pain from happening again. But the subconscious is not precise. It favors speed over accuracy. It reacts before it reflects. And that means many of our fear responses are outdated, overgeneralized, or inherited. A child raised in an unpredictable environment may grow up feeling unease in completely safe situations. Their nervous system learned to stay alert, to watch for danger where none is visible. That alertness becomes a baseline. And even when life becomes safe, the subconscious hasn't received the update. What's more, fear can be learned secondhand. You might never have been harmed by something directly, but if someone close to you was and expressed their fear, often your subconscious can adopt that fear as its own. A parent afraid of thunderstorms, a sibling terrified of water, a teacher who treated failure as a catastrophe. Their reactions become part of the emotional blueprint your mind builds quietly in the background. These early emotional blueprints matter. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, develops rapidly in early life and is closely linked to the hippocampus, which governs memory. But while memory is fragile and easily altered, fear is stubborn. You may forget the event, but not the feeling. The subconscious holds on to it tightly, ready to respond long after the conscious mind has let go. This is why healing fear is so often about more than logic. You can know something is safe and still feel unsafe. You can tell yourself there's no threat and still feel the symptoms of panic, because fear lives not in your thoughts, but in your body. The pulse, the breath, the posture. The subconscious speaks through the body, and it listens through it too. That's also where the doorway to change begins. The subconscious doesn't learn well from argument. It learns from experience, especially repeated, emotionally safe experience. When you revisit the feared situation slowly, gently, in a controlled way, and nothing bad happens, the subconscious starts to adjust. It begins to rewrite the association. The dog doesn't bite. The elevator doesn't trap you. The audience doesn't laugh. With enough repetition, the fear response softens. The emotional weight begins to shift. Sometimes, fear transforms in disguise. It can look like anger, or numbness, or avoidance. You skip the social gathering, not because you don't care, but because your subconscious is protecting you from rejection. You procrastinate, not because you're lazy, but because part of you fears failure or even success. These patterns are not flaws, they're defenses, outdated perhaps, but built with care, at a time when they were needed. And beneath even the most irrational fear, there is often a younger version of you still trying to stay safe. That child still lives in your nervous system, still bracing, still hiding, still watching, not for punishment, but for reassurance. The subconscious doesn't need to be forced into silence. It needs to be shown, over time, that it's no longer in danger. And so, as you move through the strange shapes of your own fears, the ones you can explain and the ones you cannot remember, that each of them began as protection, remember that they are messages, not enemies, and that with patience, with kindness, with repetition, even the oldest phobias can start to soften. You are not broken for having fear. You are human for learning how to live with it. The human mind, for all its complexity, is surprisingly pliable. Underneath layers of thought and reasoning, past the armor of skepticism and control, there lies a part of you that listens quietly, constantly, and with deep trust. This is the suggestible mind, not weak, not gullible, just open. Open in the way roots are open to water, open like soil waiting for seeds. And when a suggestion is planted at just the right depth, in just the right moment, it can bloom into something far more powerful than it seems. A thought that changes biology, a word that changes pain, a belief that changes the body itself. Hypnosis, for instance, is not magic. It's not sleep either. It's a focused state of absorption, where the conscious mind loosens its grip and the subconscious becomes more receptive. In this trance-like space, the filters soften, doubt grows quiet. The subconscious listens directly, and what it hears can alter everything from heart rate to skin temperature to the experience of pain. People under hypnosis have undergone dental work without anesthesia, walked barefoot across coals without burning, even halted allergic reactions simply by believing they wouldn't happen. Not because they were pretending, but because belief, when it runs deep enough, is a kind of internal chemistry. The placebo effect is another doorway into this phenomenon. A sugar pill, a saline injection, a sham surgery, they all work, in some cases, as well as the real thing. Not because the body is being fooled, but because the belief itself initiates change. The subconscious doesn't differentiate between symbol and substance as sharply as the conscious mind does. If you believe a treatment will help you, your brain may release the very chemicals needed to make that belief real. Endorphins, dopamine, immune modulators. What begins in expectation ripples into biology. Even when you know a placebo is a placebo, it can still work. Open-label placebos where participants are told they're taking an inert substance still show measurable effects, as long as they're given with the suggestion that this can help. That's the power of framing. The subconscious doesn't need deception to respond. It needs permission. It needs context. It needs the gentle push of possibility. And this isn't limited to illness or treatment. Suggestion can shape perception itself. In one study, people were shown wine labeled as expensive and cheap. The expensive wine activated more pleasure centers in the brain, even though it was identical to the cheap one. The label changed the experience, not just mentally, but neurologically. Another study gave participants a room temperature drink and told them it was hot. Their body temperature rose. The subconscious doesn't wait for confirmation. It reacts to cues: tone, posture, repetition, authority. These become the scaffolding for belief. This is why hypnosis isn't something that's done to you. It's something you allow. The best hypnotic states are not blank or passive, they are immersive. Think of the last time you were lost in a movie, in a book, in music. You forgot yourself. Time shifted. You felt things as if they were real. That's the same neural state hypnosis taps into. A narrowing of attention, a widening of influence. You become, briefly, more suggestible to the world you're focused on. And you don't need a hypnotist for this to happen. We self-hypnotize all the time. Every time you repeat a belief to yourself, especially with emotion, you're shaping your subconscious. I'm not good enough. This always happens to me. I can't do this. These are suggestions, spoken not in a therapist's office, but in the quiet interior of your own mind. And over time, the subconscious adapts to them. It doesn't argue. It builds around them. It makes them feel true, but the reverse is also possible. Healing suggestions, expansive beliefs, carefully chosen words, repeated with kindness and conviction. The subconscious is not rigid. It learns. It revises. And when it receives a new suggestion that resonates, especially in moments of stillness, emotion, or vulnerability, it starts to shift its patterns. Not all at once, but steadily, gently, like a river changing course. This is the eerie, beautiful science of belief, that your body responds not just to what is, but to what you believe might be, that your cells are listening to your inner world, that your perception, your expectation, your stories, when deeply felt, carry weight. This doesn't mean all illness is imagined, or that belief can fix everything. There are limits. But it does mean that the boundary between mind and body is more porous than we've been taught. That what happens in the subconscious doesn't stay there. It rises. It radiates. It alters blood pressure, muscle tone, healing rates. It shapes how you move, how you feel, how you experience the world. And perhaps what's most astonishing is how easily we forget this. We speak harshly to ourselves, casually, habitually. We absorb others' expectations without question. We replay criticisms, judgments, fears, and each time, the subconscious listens, not as a critic, but as a sculptor, slowly adjusting the inner landscape to match the shape of our belief. But belief can be reclaimed. You can speak to yourself with intention. You can choose new suggestions. You can interrupt the old scripts and write new ones, ones that support, soften, strengthen. It takes time, repetition, gentleness, but the subconscious will respond. It always does. So the next time you feel your body change in response to a thought, remember, this is not imagination. It is influence. A quiet dialogue between what you believe and what you become. The mind does not end at the skull. It moves through the breath, the bloodstream, the skin, and in every moment, your subconscious is waiting not just to protect, but to be guided. You are not simply at the mercy of belief. You are its author. Words are not just tools of communication. They are shapes in the dark, keys that open invisible doors. Long before you speak, and long after you forget what was said, language continues working beneath the surface. The subconscious doesn't need full sentences. It doesn't wait for grammar, or clarity, or logic. It responds to fragments, associations, impressions. A word carries weight not only in what it means, but in what it connects to. And in the quiet background of your mind, these connections are always forming, always rearranging, always guiding how you feel, what you notice, and what you do. This is why a single word can shift a mood, not because it carries magic, but because it activates a network. Say the word warmth, and the subconscious may retrieve memories of firelight, safe embraces, late afternoon sun. Say failure, and it might summon a sinking stomach, a closed door, a teacher's voice. The word is not the thing itself, it's a signal, and the subconscious listens. These signals don't need your awareness to work. In fact, they're more powerful when they slip past the guardrails of consciousness. This is called priming. When your brain is exposed to a stimulus, an image, a word, a tone, it subtly adjusts your behavior and perception in ways you don't notice. You see a list of words related to aging, gray, wrinkle, retire, and moments later, you walk more slowly. You're asked to form sentences using words like rude and aggressive, and then you're more likely to interrupt someone in conversation. You aren't choosing these reactions. The subconscious is echoing the pattern. Language primes emotion too. Describing someone as hot-tempered versus passionate doesn't just change your judgment, it changes your physiological response to them. You may feel tension in your chest, or a loosening, depending on the frame. That's the other part, framing. How something is said matters as much as what is said. A glass is half full or half empty. A medicine has a 70% success rate or a 30% failure rate. A policy saves jobs or prevents losses. The numbers don't change, but the feeling does, and the subconscious steers itself toward feeling. This is how advertising works, but also how stories work. The subconscious doesn't need proof, it needs resonance. It doesn't analyze, it absorbs. It maps emotion, rhythm, tone. That's why songs you don't like still get stuck in your head. Why certain phrases linger long after you hear them. The subconscious has its own sense of music. It memorizes patterns with an ear tuned to repetition and familiarity. Even nonsense can become powerful if it is repeated enough, said with confidence. Wrapped in a rhythm the subconscious recognizes. You don't need to understand a sentence for it to shape you. Infants learn language this way. They absorb meaning from cadence, from tone, from context. Before the words become thoughts, they become feelings. Even in adulthood, your subconscious decodes far more than you realize. You read body language, hear subtext, detect sarcasm, sense discomfort, all without narrating it to yourself. The conscious mind follows. The subconscious leads. Semantic networks are the web that holds this process together. Every word you know is connected to dozens, even hundreds of others, like constellations in a sky that only lights up when you look sideways. Think of the word home. It links to safety, childhood, certain smells, holidays, loss, belonging. No one taught you those associations. They grew from experience. And every time you hear the word again, the whole network stirs, even if only faintly. The subconscious accesses that entire constellation before the conscious mind can name even one star. And because these networks are personal, language becomes a private mirror. The same word means something different to each person, colored by memory and culture and trauma and joy. A compliment can feel like a wound. A joke can feel like a gift. We misunderstand one another not because words fail, but because they carry too much. The subconscious doesn't just receive language. It interprets, edits, filters. It decides what is safe to feel. But language can also heal. Certain phrases land so precisely, they feel like a hand reaching into the dark, a well-timed reassurance, a line of poetry, a sentence you didn't know you needed. These moments are rare not because they are rare in number, but because they require stillness. The subconscious needs space to echo. It needs a pause, a breath, a gap between the noise. Then the right words, often simple ones, can resonate all the way down. This is why silence matters, not as absence, but as readiness. In silence, the subconscious isn't idle. It is sorting, sifting, tracing paths between meaning and sensation. It's why ideas arrive in the quiet, why clarity comes not at the peak of effort, but in the release. Words work best not when they fill the space, but when they honor it. And in every conversation, you're not just speaking to someone's conscious mind, you're speaking to their patterns, their memories, their fears, their hopes. Words travel farther than you think. They pass through logic and arrive somewhere deeper where they're held, or repelled, or planted like seeds. Your tone, your framing, your pauses, they all carry meaning beyond meaning. The subconscious reads between every line. So when you speak to yourself, or others, remember, you're speaking in layers. You're not just telling, you're shaping. You're guiding attention, priming emotion, activating memories you may not know are there. Words are living things in the mind. They wander, they root, they bloom in silence. And the most powerful ones often arrive quietly, not with explanation, but with recognition. You've never truly seen yourself, not the way others do, not the way the mirror does. What you know of your own appearance is built on echoes, reflections, photographs, glances caught in passing windows. But even more than that, it's built on feeling, on memories, on the subtle signals you've absorbed since childhood, the compliments you believed, the criticisms you didn't forget, the comparisons you made when no one was watching. These things live in your subconscious, stitched together into an invisible portrait you carry everywhere. And the strange part is, this inner mirror often has very little to do with reality. It's not a faithful reflection. It's a story. And like all stories, it's shaped by repetition, emotion, and meaning. The subconscious isn't concerned with accuracy. It wants coherence. So if you were told again and again that you were too much, or not enough, or not like the others, your subconscious began to mold your self-image around those words, not as facts, but as felt truths. This is why body image is never just about the body. It's about identity, about belonging, about control, about safety. The way you perceive your own reflection has more to do with your subconscious history than with any objective measurement. A mirror is just glass and silver, but what you see in it passes through layers of belief, memory, emotion, and expectation before it registers. And mirrors are not the only ones reflecting you. Every interaction, every relationship acts like a mirror too. When someone smiles at you, listens, turns away, criticizes, praises, your subconscious takes note. Especially when you're young and the self is still forming, you watch how people respond to you, and you begin to internalize those responses. They become part of your script. A child who receives warmth and acceptance begins to feel lovable. A child who receives withdrawal or conditional approval begins to feel uncertain or unworthy. These early impressions matter. They become the scaffolding for how you see yourself later. Even if you grow, even if your body changes, even if your environment shifts, the subconscious often continues projecting the same old image. It's why someone can lose weight, gain strength, or achieve something remarkable and still feel like the same insecure version of themselves. Because the subconscious hasn't caught up. It doesn't update automatically. It updates through experience, through feeling, through consistent emotional contrast. Sometimes the disconnect becomes so intense it leads to distortion. People with body dysmorphia, for instance, often see flaws that no one else notices. Their perception is not delusion. It's deeply felt and deeply shaped by subconscious emotional loops. It's not about vanity. It's about vulnerability. The subconscious has tied certain features or shapes to pain, to judgment, to fear, and so it fixates, not to harm, but to protect. If it can just control that flaw, maybe the rejection won't come. But it's not always so extreme. Most of us live with subtler versions of this same phenomenon. You avoid certain clothes because you don't look right in them, even if no one else would notice. You tilt your head a certain way in photos. You criticize your laugh, your nose, your voice, not because these things are wrong, but because somewhere along the way, they became attached to a story of not good enough. And these stories run deep. They're reinforced not just by people, but by culture, media, advertising, filters, algorithms. They all play a role in shaping the mirror. They tell you what's desirable, what's normal, what's aspirational. And the subconscious, always listening, begins to recalibrate. It compares, it judges, it absorbs, not because it's vain, but because it wants to belong. But here's the quiet truth. The subconscious can unlearn what it once absorbed. The mirror can be reshaped, slowly, gently, not by force, but by new experience. By surrounding yourself with different messages, by speaking to yourself with curiosity instead of contempt, by allowing people close to you who reflect warmth instead of judgment. Each time your subconscious is exposed to a kinder reflection in word, in gesture, in emotion, it begins to soften the old script. Neuroscience supports this. The brain has plasticity. The subconscious updates through pattern and emotion. New pathways can be built, even after years of the same inner dialogue. But it takes time. The critical voice is often louder because it's been repeated longer. But repetition works both ways. Every kind word, every act of self-compassion, every moment of stillness, where you simply allow yourself to exist without evaluation, these become new bricks in a better mirror. And eventually, something shifts. You catch your reflection and feel is neutral, or even kind. You let yourself be photographed without shrinking. You begin to move through the world as if you belong, not because the mirror has changed, but because the mind behind it has. Your subconscious is always watching, but it's also always learning. It doesn't need perfection. It needs safety. It needs honesty. It needs a chance to rewrite the old stories with new endings. You are not the sum of passing reflections. You are the quiet presence behind them. And every day, you have the chance to meet yourself again, not in judgment, but in recognition. Before you choose, something inside you already has. Long before you lift a finger, voice an answer, or even become aware that a choice is before you, your brain has stirred in the dark. It begins not with thought, but with preparation. A ripple through neurons, a signal that doesn't wait for language. And by the time your conscious mind declares a decision, the subconscious has already cast its vote quietly, automatically, without your permission. This strange truth was once just theory, but over the years, science found ways to watch it unfold. In lab rooms filled with blinking lights and gentle clicks of machines, researchers began peering into the moment before choice. Participants were asked to make simple decisions: press a button with the left or right hand, choose between two letters, select a shape on a screen. It seemed harmless, ordinary, but while they waited, electrodes and scanners traced patterns in the brain, and what they found changed everything. Signals in the motor cortex regions responsible for movement were firing seconds before the participant reported having made a choice. Not milliseconds, seconds. The brain had already set the wheels in motion while the conscious mind was still deciding. In some studies, up to 7 seconds ahead, the outcome could be predicted based on subconscious activity. The decision didn't start with intention. It started with impulse, a whisper beneath awareness. This doesn't mean you have no control, but it does mean that control is layered. The subconscious proposes, prepares, even initiates. The conscious mind interprets, narrates, and sometimes interrupts. You still have the power to change course, but only if you catch it in time. Often, you don't. And the decision, though it feels deliberate, is already unfolding. This preconscious activity happens not just in movement, but in preference. Studies using brain scans and eye tracking show that when people are asked to choose between options, a snack, a color, a product, their attention lingers on their eventual choice before they realize it. The eyes know, the body knows, the brain leans toward what it wants before the story of why it wants it even begins. And then, once the choice is made, the conscious mind rushes in to explain it, to rationalize, to assign meaning, as if it had been in charge the whole time. But the subconscious doesn't wait for a reason. It is driven by pattern, by familiarity, by instinct. It recognizes the shape of past pleasure and pain, and it guides you toward or away with a quiet urgency. Often, what you call a gut feeling is the result of years of unnoticed learning. Your subconscious has seen this shape before, this tone, this expression, this setting, and it remembers how things ended. It doesn't need words. It just signals yes or no. This is why you can feel something is off before you know why. Why you can like or dislike someone instantly, without a clear reason. Your brain is pulling from a deep archive of stored impressions, emotional fragments, associations you never meant to collect. Decision-making, at this level, is not about weighing pros and cons. It's about resonance. What feels familiar, safe, aligned. The conscious mind consults logic. The subconscious consults history. And sometimes, it gets it wrong. A past trauma can color a present choice. An old belief can cloud new possibilities. The subconscious is fast, but it's not always right. It favors efficiency over exploration. If a path once led to pain, it may steer you away forever, even if it no longer poses a threat. If a pattern brought comfort, it may draw you back even when it's harmful. This is the inertia of the unseen. You keep making the same kinds of choices and wonder why change feels so difficult. But this too can shift. The subconscious learns from experience. It updates not through argument, but through repetition, through emotion, through gentle exposure to new outcomes. When you repeatedly choose differently, when you feel safe and rewarded for doing so, the subconscious begins to redraw its maps. The preconscious signals shift. The urge to retreat weakens. The pull toward growth strengthens. Still, awareness helps. Naming what is automatic gives you space. You begin to notice the moment before the moment, the twinge of hesitation, the leaning of attention, the faint spark of attraction or resistance. And in that space, you get a chance to ask, is this mine or is this old wiring? Am I acting from curiosity or from fear? Is this a reflex or a choice? You won't always catch it. Much of life still unfolds in the background, but each time you bring light to the dark, even a little, you reclaim authorship. You stop being a passenger in your own mind. The brain is not a single decision maker, it's a chorus. The subconscious sets the tempo. The conscious mind writes the lyrics, but the song is always forming before you hear it. And when you realize that, you don't lose control. You learn where to listen. You do not see the world as it is. You see it as your mind allows you to. Every glance, every judgment, every gut reaction arrives already colored by something older and quieter than thought. The subconscious is not passive. It is an editor, a filter, a lens shaped by experience, repetition, memory, fear, hope, and identity. Long before you recognize a face, read a sentence, or form an opinion, your mind has already interpreted what it means, not always correctly, but efficiently. The subconscious favors speed, and to move quickly, it uses shortcuts. These shortcuts are what psychologists call heuristics, mental rules of thumb that help the brain conserve energy. They are helpful, mostly, but they come with a cost. Because to simplify a complex world, the brain must generalize. It must assume. It must predict. And in doing so, it sometimes hides the full truth from you. This is where bias begins. Not in hatred or malice, but in the silent mechanics of attention and memory. Implicit bias is not always what you believe. It's what your subconscious remembers, even if you don't. Imagine walking into a room full of strangers. Your eyes move without your permission. Your posture adjusts. Your heartbeat shifts, ever so slightly. You don't choose these reactions. They are shaped by a lifetime of unseen associations. Maybe you feel more at ease around certain faces, more guarded around others. Maybe you trust certain voices more, certain clothing styles, certain body languages. You think you are being rational, but you are being guided softly, invisibly by old imprints. These imprints are not always fair. They are not always kind, but they are real. The subconscious learns through exposure. It watches patterns. It links emotions to stimuli. It notices who is celebrated and who is mocked, who is trusted and who is feared, who gets the lead role and who plays the villain. Over time, it builds maps. It doesn't ask whether the map is just. It asks whether it helps you navigate faster. And once the map is built, it's hard to unsee it. Even when your conscious mind disagrees, the subconscious still nudges you toward the familiar path. This is why good people can hold harmful assumptions, why progressive ideals can coexist with subtle prejudices, why inclusion efforts often fail to reach the deeper layers of perception. It's not enough to change what we think. We must also change what we feel before we think the flash of judgment that arrives before the sentence forms. And this isn't just about race or gender or culture. Bias appears in hundreds of ways. You might subconsciously trust tall people more, or assume someone's intelligence based on their accent. You might see youth as energy and age as rigidity. You might feel safer around those who mirror your values, not because they're kinder, but because they're predictable. The brain favors familiarity. It feels like truth. But reality is more complex than any shortcut. And that complexity threatens the subconscious. It challenges the comfort of certainty, so the brain defends its lens. It notices information that confirms what it already believes and quietly discards what doesn't. This is called confirmation bias. It's the mind's way of preserving its own map, even when the territory has changed. These biases shape more than opinions. They shape relationships, opportunities, institutions, and lives. They determine who gets the benefit of the doubt, who gets interrupted, who gets promoted, who gets believed. They influence hiring decisions, sentencing outcomes, medical diagnoses. Not because people are cruel, but because their subconscious filters are unexamined. And the most dangerous bias is the one we don't believe we have. Because when we deny it, we stop looking for it. We stop noticing the subtle shifts in language, in tone, in reaction. But awareness is not guilt. It is power. It is the beginning of re-seeing, of holding space between reaction and response. The brain can change its lens, but it doesn't change through shame. It changes through repeated, meaningful exposure to difference, not as threat, but as value. It changes when we slow down and ask ourselves, what am I assuming here? What am I not seeing? What part of me is being protected by this judgment? Because bias often serves identity. It tells us who we are by telling us who we are not. And to question our lens is to question the boundaries of self. But this is how empathy grows, not by declaring ourselves objective, but by recognizing that no one is. We all see through layers. The goal is not to erase the lens, it's to clean it, to adjust its focus, to ask better questions about what we think we know. The subconscious doesn't like being wrong, but it respects pattern. And when we create new patterns in stories, in friendships, in daily choices, the mind takes note. Slowly, it begins to rewire. New associations form, old maps fade, and perception shifts. You may never see the world with perfect clarity, but you can learn to see yourself seeing. And from there, everything begins to change. Some things move you before you understand them. A certain chord progression, played just so, can make your chest ache and your eyes blur without warning. A painting can hold your gaze longer than a stranger's stare, speaking in colors you've never named. A sunset, though you've seen 1,000 before, can still pull a hush from your lungs, like the breath had been waiting all day to escape. These moments aren't logical. They don't explain themselves, but they arrive, full and heavy, like messages slipped beneath the door of your awareness, and your subconscious opens them before you do. The response is ancient. Music, art, rhythm, light, they reach into something older than language. The structures in your brain that interpret beauty, that process emotion, that recognize pattern, they do not wait for permission from your thinking mind. The limbic system, the amygdala, the basal ganglia, these are deep brain structures, primal and fast. When you hear a melody, these regions light up like stars. They don't ask, what does this mean? They ask, how does this feel? And the answer comes not in words, but in waves. This is why music can feel like memory, even when you've never heard it before. Why a voice in a minor key can make your heart feel like it's remembering something it lost. The subconscious loves pattern, and music is the architecture of pattern. Rhythm, harmony, tempo. They echo the rhythms inside you, your heartbeat, your breath, the pulse of your steps across a wooden floor, the lull of a mother's voice in the womb. You were rhythmic before you were conscious. And so when music touches that rhythm, it's not entertainment, it's recognition. Art does something similar, but in shape and light. Your visual system is tuned to contrast, to symmetry, to faces and flow. When you look at a painting or a photograph that moves you, your brain is decoding more than image. It is measuring balance, motion, story. It is guessing what comes next. It is remembering. The subconscious reads art the way it reads, a dream symbol by symbol, layer by layer. Not always literally, but emotionally. You may not know why a piece stays with you, but something in you was mirrored there. Some mood, some longing, some truth, and awe. That mysterious, swelling feeling when confronted with vastness or beauty is perhaps the most subconscious of all. It shrinks the ego without harming it. It quiets thought and expands awareness. Sunsets do this, mountains do this, cathedrals, oceans, galaxies, silence. When you stand before something enormous and still, your brain temporarily stops trying to name and control everything. The default mode network, that busy hum of self-referencing thought, quiets, and in its place rises a kind of reverence, not because you decided to feel it, but because your subconscious recognized something greater than itself. Scientists have studied this too. Awe is linked to reduced inflammation, increased generosity, and a sense of connection. It softens rigid thinking and opens us to new perspectives, not because we try to change, but because our bodies and brains respond to scale and beauty in ways we barely understand. It is as if the subconscious, for a moment, is reminded of its place in a larger order, not at the center, but within the whole. Even rhythm, in its simplest form, carries this power. A drum beat, a chant, a repeated phrase. These bypass the analytical brain. They go directly to the body, to the motor cortex, to the breath. You sway, tap, nod not because you decide to, but because rhythm calls to something ancient inside you. Rituals across every culture have used rhythm to connect, to heal, to open the subconscious. The steady repetition creates a trance-like state, reducing anxiety, dissolving boundaries. In these moments, you are less a mind in a body and more a body in motion, a being of pulse and presence. None of this needs language. That's what makes it powerful. Language is slow. It explains. It divides. But music and art and rhythm move faster. They unify. They allow contradiction. You can feel joy and grief at once in a single melody. You can feel lost and found in the same sunset. The subconscious doesn't mind paradox. It only asks, does this move me? And when it does, it changes you. Not always in a grand, obvious way, but subtly, repeatedly, like water shaping stone. A song becomes a companion through a hard season. A painting becomes a window to a calmer place. A dance becomes a way back into your body. These aren't hobbies. They are forms of medicine for the unseen self. This is why we cry at concerts, why we return to the same museum, why we chase golden light with our cameras. We are not just chasing beauty. We are seeking resonance. We are reminding our subconscious that it is not alone, that someone else has felt this, seen this, survived this, that someone else knew how to capture it, because beauty, in all its forms, is a signal. It tells the subconscious, stay, listen, remember, heal, and so you do, without knowing how. Change begins in silence, not in shouting declarations or grand public gestures, but in the quiet space between thought and repetition, between awareness and reflex. Deep in the folds of the brain, behind every behavior, every reaction, every unspoken belief, there is a well-worn trail, a path the subconscious follows because it always has. But what if that trail could be rerouted? What if the subconscious, that invisible architect of your life, could be taught new ways to think, to feel, to choose? For much of history, the subconscious was seen as untouchable, a sealed vault of instinct and memory. But the truth is both more hopeful and more complex. The subconscious is not a stone wall. It is a living network, a web of patterns strengthened by use and softened by disuse. And like any living system, it can change. Neuroplasticity is the word scientists use to describe this process, the brain's ability to physically rewire itself based on experience. Every thought you repeat, every behavior you reinforce, every image you return to, lays down another thread in the subconscious fabric. Over time, those threads form habits, identities, and even emotions. But just as they were formed, they can be unwoven carefully, patiently, with practice. Affirmations are one such practice. Not magic spells, not empty slogans, but intentional inputs into a system that's always listening. The subconscious doesn't argue or analyze the way the conscious mind does. It absorbs repetition, rhythm, emotion. So when a phrase is spoken aloud, I am safe, I am enough, I am capable of healing, and spoken not once, but again and again, over days, weeks, years, something begins to shift. Not because the words are objectively true, but because the subconscious begins to treat them as familiar. And what is familiar often feels safe. This is not wishful thinking. Studies in cognitive behavioral therapy have shown that affirmations, paired with emotional engagement and visualization, can reframe internal narratives and reduce stress. They do not work instantly. They do not erase pain. but they can tilt the balance ever so slightly away from fear and toward possibility. And over time, that tilt becomes a new baseline. Exposure therapy uses a different path to the same destination. Instead of speaking safety into the subconscious, it gently leads the subconscious to experience it. When someone afraid of flying, for instance, is slowly and carefully introduced to the idea of flight images of planes, recordings of engine noise, brief visits to airports, the subconscious begins to learn that fear is not inevitable. Each exposure rewrites the emotional script. The body's fear response, once automatic, begins to soften. Eventually, the plane becomes just a place, not a threat. This principle applies to many fears of public speaking, of crowds, of dogs, of failure. The key is not to avoid the fear, but to approach it with new information. The subconscious does not respond to logic alone. It responds to experience. And when experience shows that safety is possible, that doom does not follow every unfamiliar step, the brain adapts. But reprogramming the subconscious is not limited to fear. It can also open new doors of creativity, confidence, compassion. Visualization, for instance, activates many of the same brain regions involved in real activity. Athletes who mentally rehearse their routines show improved performance. Speakers who visualize a calm delivery reduce anxiety. The subconscious does not easily distinguish between vivid imagination and lived experience. So when we feed it images of success, healing, or connection, it begins to prepare the body and mind for those outcomes. This is not to say that every problem can be solved through repetition or visualization. The subconscious is layered and complex, shaped by biology, trauma, and culture. Some patterns run deep, with roots in childhood or generations past. But even here, change is possible. Through therapy, meditation, journaling, or guided introspection, these patterns can be brought into the light, examined, softened. A belief like, "I am unworthy," long hidden beneath behavior, can be seen not as truth but as a story, and stories can be rewritten. The process is not linear. Old paths are comfortable, even when they hurt. The subconscious resists change because it values efficiency and safety. But with consistency, even resistance becomes a teacher. Each time an old fear rises, it becomes a chance to meet it differently. Each time an old pattern returns, it offers an opportunity to pause, breathe, and choose again. And that moment of choice, tiny, quiet, often unnoticed, is the hinge on which transformation turns. Reprogramming the subconscious is less like flipping a switch and more like tending a garden. You pull weeds not once, but regularly. You plant new seeds with care. You water them, even when they haven't yet sprouted. And over time, new growth appears. Different thoughts, calmer reactions, a sense of agency where once there was only reaction. Even the language you use matters. The subconscious is attuned to metaphor and story. Saying, "I am broken," feeds one narrative. Saying, "I am healing," feeds another. One tightens the body, the other softens it. Language shapes physiology. Words echo in the nervous system long after they are spoken. And so, the question becomes, what do you want your subconscious to hear? Because it is always listening, not just to your words, but to your posture, your breath, your habits, your silence. It listens to what you avoid and what you pursue, to how you treat others and how you treat yourself. Every day, it gathers evidence for the world it believes you live in. And from that evidence, it builds your reality. But if that reality no longer serves you, if it feels too small, too heavy, too painful, you can begin to change the story. Not all at once, not perfectly, but steadily. And slowly, the mind that once held you back becomes the mind that sets you free. Beneath your personal memories and the intricate architecture of your individual mind, beneath your childhood and your habits, your likes and dislikes, there is something older, something less you, and more human, a quiet echo that hums beneath culture and time. Carl Jung called it the collective unconscious, a layer of mind shared not just by families or nations, but by the species itself. A repository of symbols, stories, and instincts that surface again and again across centuries and civilizations, often without us knowing why. Jung believed that just as the body carries the evolutionary imprint of life before it, the bones of fish in your wrist, the reflexes of ancestors who ran from predators, the mind carries a deeper blueprint too. A psychic inheritance, not of memories, but of tendencies, forms, templates, what he called archetypes, the hero, the shadow, the mother, the trickster, the wise, old man. These are not characters, but structures, shapes of story and emotion that recur not because we imitate each other, but because they live within us already. They show up in dreams, in myths, in religion, in art. A young warrior faces the darkness and returns changed. A lost child is guided by a mysterious elder. A god sacrifices and is reborn. Again and again, in cultures that never touched, the same shapes emerge. Is it coincidence, or is it coding? Modern science doesn't always speak in the same language as Jung, but the patterns he noticed are hard to ignore. In dreams, people describe falling, flying, being chased, losing teeth, returning to childhood homes. In every country, across every demographic, the same scenarios rise up. No one teaches them. They simply arrive, uninvited and strangely familiar. Why does a snake evoke fear and awe across continents? Why do labyrinths appear in mythologies from Greece to India to the Americas? Why does fire symbolize both creation and destruction? The subconscious, Jung believed, speaks in symbols, not just personal ones, but universal ones. And these symbols are shaped not only by individual experience, but by the vast inheritance of the human story, a story that stretches far beyond written language, into firelight and cave walls and the silent awe of sky. Even children, untouched by complex philosophies, gravitate towards certain shapes. They know what a monster is. They intuit what a hero must do. They recognize the danger in a dark forest, the safety in a mother's arms, the thrill of discovering a hidden door. These are not just tales. They are rituals of understanding, ways the subconscious prepares us to meet the world. And in dreams, these symbols do their quiet work. They present challenges and riddles. They summon lost ancestors and impossible landscapes. You dream not just of your life, but of life. Your subconscious borrows from the archive of humanity, mixing ancient fears with modern faces, ancient hopes with modern doubts. A dream might start in your kitchen and end in a temple made of stars, because the subconscious does not care for realism, it cares for resonance. Jung saw the collective unconscious as a kind of psychic gravity. You might think your story is uniquely yours, but again and again, it bends toward familiar arcs, toward betrayal, redemption, exile, return. The personal journey and the mythic journey overlap. A breakup becomes a descent into the underworld. A new job becomes a call to adventure. An illness becomes a dragon to be faced. Not because you chose to frame it that way, but because the subconscious knows these shapes. They are how it understands change. This doesn't mean we are trapped by myth, only that we are shaped by it. And when we understand the patterns beneath our stories, we gain a new kind of freedom. We begin to see that the roles we play, victim, villain, guide, seeker, are not fixed. They are masks, and behind them is something deeper still. Jung also believed that the collective unconscious is not static. It evolves with us. As new challenges arise, technology, globalization, isolation, the symbols may shift in form, but their roots remain. The internet is a new forest. Social media is a new mirror. Artificial intelligence becomes a new trickster. But the emotional truth beneath them, The fear of being seen, the longing to belong, the confusion of transformation remains unchanged. The idea of the collective unconscious is not universally accepted in science, but its influence lingers. Depth psychology, dream analysis, narrative therapy all draw on Jung's insight that meaning is not made solely by reason, but by connection. That healing does not always come from explanation, but from integration, bringing the unseen into the seen, giving shape to the formless, giving name to the unnamed, and sometimes just listening to the dream that woke you, to the story you can't stop telling, to the art that pulls something wordless from your chest. In these moments, your subconscious may be reaching not just into your own past, but into something older, something shared, something human. The collective unconscious is not a place. It is a rhythm, a resonance, a quiet chorus beneath the noise of individuality. And sometimes, when the night is still and your thoughts have softened, you can hear it singing through you. Beneath the voice in your head, beneath the narrating and planning and doubting, there is another presence. It doesn't speak in sentences, it doesn't announce itself, but it is always there, watching, responding, nudging, shaping. This is the subconscious, the silent architect of your inner world, and though it moves beneath the surface, it is not unreachable. With time and quiet and attention, you can begin to feel it moving. Awareness, true awareness, is not a spotlight but a softening. It begins in stillness, when the noise of daily life finally grows tired of itself and fades into the background. In that stillness, something long hidden can be glimpsed. Meditation is one path, not a magical portal or a quick fix, but a practice of returning to breath, to body, to now. Again and again, each time the mind drifts off chasing thought or memory or plan, you gently return. And in this returning, something else happens. You begin to notice what you're returning from, the voice that frets over the future, the images that replay past wounds, the assumptions you didn't know were assumptions. You don't stop them, you see them. You see them come and go like weather. You become the one who watches. This watching is not cold or detached. It is tender, like holding a frightened animal in your hands and not trying to fix it, just to understand. You begin to feel when a reaction rises from habit instead of truth, when anger is just fear in disguise, when silence is not peace but protection. The subconscious doesn't yield its patterns easily. They were built to keep you safe, even the ones that hurt, especially those. Therapy is another path inward, not because someone else has your answers, but because they can hold up a mirror you've avoided. Sometimes, the unconscious hides behind language. I'm fine becomes code for I'm afraid. It's not a big deal, becomes a shield for old wounds. A good therapist listens not only to what you say, but how you say it, where your breath catches, where your story skips, where your smile doesn't quite reach your eyes. And in the safety of that space, you may speak something for the first time, or hear yourself say something you didn't know you believed. The moment it leaves your mouth, you feel the shift, as if some inner knot has loosened, even if just slightly. This is how the subconscious becomes known, not all at once, but in fragments, in flickers. Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward becoming whole, not perfect, not fixed, but real. It's not about replacing the subconscious with the conscious, but integrating them, letting the forgotten parts of you come into the light. The ashamed child, the unseen artist, the silenced protector, the lost dream, all those selves that were locked away because they didn't fit, they wait. And when you are quiet enough, gentle enough, brave enough, they come to the door. Sometimes the unveiling happens sideways. A song makes you cry and you don't know why. A scent takes you back to a childhood you hadn't remembered. You wake from a dream and carry its feeling with you for hours. These are not accidents. They are messages, not in riddles to be solved, but in emotions to be felt. The subconscious does not explain itself, but it longs to be known. Even your body holds these truths. Tension where there is no reason, a sigh that escapes before your thoughts catch up, a stomach that churns in the absence of threat. These are signals, invitations. The body remembers what the mind forgets, and when you listen not to diagnose, not to fix, but to feel the language of the unconscious, becomes a little clearer. It is easy to want to rush this work, to shine a flashlight into every shadow and demand answers. But the subconscious does not respond to pressure. It opens slowly, like a flower in the dark, unsure if the light is safe. So you must become the safe light, patient, warm, non-judging. Awareness is not just knowing what's there, it is accepting it. You will meet parts of yourself you don't like. Jealousy, rage, need. You will meet parts of yourself you've missed. Wonder, play, tenderness. And each time, if you stay with them, if you offer them breath instead of shame, they will soften, they will shift, and eventually they will integrate. There is no final arrival, no ultimate clarity, just a deepening, an unfolding, and a quiet knowing that grows in the background of your life. You may notice yourself responding differently, choosing differently. You may still feel the old impulses, but now you see them rising. You see the choice. That is the gift of awareness, not perfection, but possibility. And in that possibility, there is power. The kind that doesn't shout or dominate, but that moves like roots in the soil. Steady, nourishing, hidden, but essential. You are not just the thoughts you think. You are the space they move through. You are not just the story you tell. You are the awareness that holds the pen. To become aware of the unconscious is not to conquer it. It is to make peace, to bow to the mystery that you are, to sit in stillness with the parts of you that have never had words, and to listen. In that listening, a new kind of self begins to emerge, one that is not fragmented, not edited, not curated, but whole, not perfect, just real.